Russia has refused dam victims' appeals for United Nations aid. The long-awaited counteroffensive by Ukraine against Russia's invading forces has finally begun. In an effort to reclaim occupied territory, Kyiv has launched attacks in the south and east of Ukraine. Meanwhile, the destruction of the Novokakhovka Dam in Russian-occupied territory in Ukraine has worsened conditions on the ground, forcing the evacuation of thousands. In March 2022, Nikkei Asia made the decision to halt reporting from Russia until more details about the new criminal code scope became available. Information from wire services and other sources is included in the entries. Here are the most recent happenings. Time in Tokyo, Monday, June 19. 9:40 a.m. Russia's chances of success in its invasion of Ukraine have been severely diminished by its numerous strategic and military missteps. Georgia is part of the former Soviet bloc, but that does not mean Russia is losing the geopolitical war to expand its sphere of influence. Take the time to learn more. According to the United Nations, Moscow turned down aid offers meant to assist those impacted by the breached Kakhovka Dam. Russian officials reported 35 deaths in Moscow-controlled areas after the dam broke on June 6, releasing floodwaters across southern Ukraine and Russia-occupied parts of the Kherson region. The Ukrainian Interior Ministry reported 17 deaths and 31 missing people. Over 11,000 people have been removed from both sides. A senior Ukrainian government official told Reuters ahead of this week's summit that Ukraine is seeking up to $40 billion to fund the first phase of a Green Marshall Plan to rebuild its economy. Beginning on Wednesday in London, politicians and financiers will talk about the country's short-term funding issues and long-term reconstruction efforts. The World Bank estimates the cost to rebuild Ukraine at $411 billion, which is 3 times the country's GDP. Nikkei found that Japanese semiconductors are still making their way into Russia. After obtaining Russian customs data and analyzing import records from February 24, 2022, through March 31, 2019, Nikkei concluded that more action is required to prevent the indirect flow of goods that are currently evading sanctions. Take the time to learn more. Nikkei also reported in April that despite the U.S. government's ban on exports to Russia, American-made semiconductors were making their way into the country through trading companies in Hong Kong and elsewhere. Russian authorities have, so far, declined our request to access the areas under its temporary military control. Since the Kakhovka Dam broke on June 6, the United Nations has said. UN Humanitarian Coordinator for Ukraine Denise Brown issued a statement urging the Russian authorities to act in accordance with their obligations under international humanitarian law. As a result of the dam breaking, civilians have been cut off from their usual supply routes. African leaders who had hoped to mediate the Ukraine conflict were cut off by Russian President Vladimir Putin, who explained why he thought many of their proposals were misguided and poured cold water on a plan that Kyiv had already largely rejected. In Russia and Ukraine, the African leaders hoped to secure consensus on a package of confidence-building measures. Putin opened the meeting in a palace near St. Petersburg by emphasizing Russia's commitment to Africa. In attendance were delegates from Senegal, Egypt, Zambia, Uganda, the Congo Republic, Comoros, and South Africa. But after the presidents of Comora, Senegal, and South Africa had presented, he cut in to question the plan's foundations, which were built on the acceptance of internationally recognized borders. Russian President Vladimir Putin tells a visiting delegation of African leaders that only 3% of Ukrainian grain exports under a UN deal have gone to the poorest countries, so the problem of high global food prices remains unsolved. Putin attributes the food shortage to Western countries rather than the war, which Russia refers to as a special military operation. It is time to negotiate an end to the fighting, African leaders tell Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Egyptian Prime Minister is leading a delegation to St. Petersburg, Russia, which includes the presidents of Senegal, South Africa, Zambia, and Comoros. The day before, the delegation was in Kyiv to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.